once again, good afternoon, ladies and gents. People coming in all the time. We are expecting almost 200 people this afternoon, so we're just giving people a chance to sign in. And as I mentioned just now, Fergus is struggling to get in as well, so we'll give him a few minutes to get in and join us. So very welcome to you all. Sorry we had to put this back from our normal midday time slot, but that was to coincide with Fergus's very busy diary. And obviously we were keen to get Fergus back because we had the gremlins last time a fortnight ago when he had a power cut. And of course, the Wi-Fi was therefore knocked out. So we're delighted that Fergus is able to join us again today, and he'll be with us very shortly. What we're going to do today, just while we await his arrival, after my brief introduction, we're just going to recap on the survey results from last time. We're going through the Slido results that you very kindly filled in a couple of weeks ago. Then I'm going to ask Fergus to give a brief run through, because I do know that most of the people that are signing in this afternoon were here a fortnight ago. And then what we're going to do, the main meat of today, will be all around the questions that you posed last time round. There were well over 80. So what I've done with the team from Leaders Meet is just sort of condense them. And we've got the top 20%, which we've brought together. And what I would invite you to do, ladies and gents, if you would, is use the Slido code, which we're going to put up in a minute. And if you've got any comments or questions, perhaps you'd use Slido so we know exactly what we're dealing with. So if you want to ask supplementary questions or pose comments, if you could do that with Slido. So Fergus, glad to see you again. Hopefully we won't have a power cut this time round.
Yeah, good afternoon, Andrew. That was my second greatest, I think, Zoom call interruption story. It comes just after the time the bird flew into the room that I was doing one from.
All right, okay. Yeah. Well, I think we've all experienced issues this last 12 months. We'll all be able to write a book on it, I think.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen, now Fergus is here. So welcome to our weekly webinar, brought to you by the Structural Timber Association, by Constructing Excellence nationally, South West, Midlands, Wales, and the North East, and the CIOB in the South West. So we're all delighted that Fergus can join us again. What I'm going to ask you to do, ladies and gents, is just go to that slido.com reference there, hashtag LM220121, and that's where you can comment and so on what you're seeing and hearing. So Abraham, could we just have a quick recap, please, on the questions from last time, the survey questions from last time? This is what you said 2 weeks ago when we asked you questions on the Construction Playbook. So question 1 was, how would you rate your knowledge of the Construction Playbook? And as we can see, it was less than half, 23% there in the middle, but an average score of 4.3. So obviously many of you would come on to learn about the Construction Playbook, which is great. And we've got the right man here to tell us about it. So next question, please, Abraham. How much do you agree with the approach set out in the Construction Playbook? Well, this is understandably a higher score of 7.4. And I would suggest, as we all learn more about the playbook, this figure may well rise still further. The next question, please, Abraham. How well do you think the playbook sets a coherent strategy? Again, 6.4, with the biggest score being 8. I would suggest, again, once we all know a little bit more about it, this score might rise again. Next question, please, Abraham. Do you think there are gaps? Well, again, sort of a medium score there, because obviously we don't know it well enough. I would suggest to maybe comment in detail. So that score may change as we get more informed. Next question, please. Now, I'm just going to scroll through some of the specific comments that you made, ladies and gents. Abraham, if you could just sort of give people a chance to read some of these. I know Fergus and I have been through this in advance. And some of the comments that you make here from last time actually do come out in the questions that we're going to go through later on. Abraham, I think what would be quite good if you could maybe put a link on Slido so that people can read these later, maybe in their own time, because there's quite a lot of them. And I do think that much of this is going to be answered when Fergus and I go into the Q&A session in a few moments' time. Is there any more, Abraham?
It's the last question.
No, I mean, you've stopped scrolling, I meant.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then how can the industry best respond to the proposals? And here we are, again, another set of views. You're going to scroll through these, please, if you would. And again, if you could put these on Slido, Abraham, that would be great.
Yeah.
So some good points there, Fergus, which I'm sure you've seen and
Absolutely
inwardly digested. Lots of food for thought there. There's a good answer. Don't know. Okay. Lots of things about collaboration and culture change and so on. So partnership, look at that. Okay. I think we'll move on now then, ladies and gents. If we may. Thank you, Abraham. Fergus, welcome back.
Thank you.
I think we agreed you'd give us a very brief update and then we can get into the Q&A in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to turn my camera off and mute myself, and the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Fergus Harradence, Deputy Director for Construction, Infrastructure, Procurement and Rail in the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. But what's probably more germane for the purposes of today's discussion is that I was actually one of the chapter authors who helped draft part of the Construction Playbook and was involved in the development and drafting and commenting on the whole playbook, all of the text, all the different chapters, working in conjunction with various people from the industry. And as part of the development of the playbook process, we did have around about 1,000 hours of industry engagement with firms large and small, from the largest contractors and consultants right the way through to some technology-based SMEs who are potentially contributing innovative solutions that the industry can use to improve project delivery in various ways. So if I just start by giving you a quick recap of what the Construction Playbook is all about. It is essentially an approach that aims to reset the relationship between government and the construction industry, to move it away from the transactional project-based approach that we've followed for years to one which is much more strategic and is focused on delivery of longer-term policy objectives and what the CLC, certainly, the Construction Leadership Council, would term longer-term strategic objectives for the industry as well. And what I mean by that is, on the government side, it's trying to ensure that when we invest in infrastructure and construction projects, we're not just purchasing an asset, we're purchasing an asset that will deliver best value over its life cycle, one that's safe, one that's going to contribute towards the delivery of net zero carbon, bearing in mind that almost everything that we build from now on, whether it's a house, whether it's a railway station, or whether it's another type of infrastructure, transport related, social, whatever, is likely to be here in 2050. And so is going to form part of what you might term the national balance sheet in relation to carbon emissions, that we will need to make net zero carbon by that date and are legally required to do so. From the industry side, it's about making sure that we are delivering some of the things that the industry's recognised it needs to do for a long period of time, which is making it less labour intensive, making it more productive, more efficient, and making the supply chain function more efficiently, but also more fairly for all of the firms that are involved in it, particularly SMEs. So the playbook essentially aims to set out how we're going to go about doing that. It is part of a wider framework of policies under the broad umbrella of something that's called Project Speed, which is a group chaired by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is looking at how we can improve major project delivery within government end to end. So everything from planning and project conception right the way through to handover and asset management. And Construction Playbook is one of the bits in the middle of that. But the aim is to use this as the blueprint for the way in which government procures construction work. And that's all stages from essentially the decision that we're going to do something and how we go about commissioning design work through to market engagement, determining what sort of procurement exercise we want to run, and then looking at how we manage that and what contracting structures we put in place and how we manage relationships with firms in our supply chain throughout the delivery of the project or programme, and what our expectations will be of them in terms of the way in which they go about undertaking work and ensuring that they manage their own supply chains well and efficiently. So the aim at the end of the process of implementing Project Speed is that we will have put ourselves in a position where we can achieve a number of different objectives. Firstly, we have an industry that's more efficient and is capable consistently of delivering better outputs for its clients, public and private sector. We also want an industry that's maximising its contribution to society, whether it's in terms of employment, whether it's in terms of developing and commercialising innovations, widening opportunities in disadvantaged communities or to disadvantaged groups within society. And also we do want a more productive, sustainable, financially robust and resilient industry, and one which is more, with which we have a more open, transparent and balanced relationship than we've had in the past. And the one important message that I think, that I will end on, and I'm sure it will also feature in the responses to a number of the questions, are that the whole spirit that's animated the development of the Construction Playbook is collaboration. So we've worked with the industry to identify what should be in the playbook, how we should phrase wording of the playbook in order that industry understands it and it resonates with the wider stakeholder base. And we want to take that forward into the delivery phase of the Construction Playbook. So what we hope we will see as part of the process of implementing the playbook is that government and industry will work together. The communication between the two sides will be much better. People will be sharing information and having honest conversations about what projects should cost, what a fair margin of profit is, but also how people are on either side going to be investing to build their capability and improving the way in which they go about commissioning or delivering projects and programs from now on. So conscious that we've already burnt through 15 minutes of the session, I will stop there, but very happy to spend the next 45 minutes answering whatever questions you choose to bombard me with.
Thank you very much, Fergus. If you could stop sharing your screen. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm going to ask Abraham now if he could put questions up as we go. We had 80 questions last time. As I say, we've sort of tried to condense. So Abraham, if you could show us the first question, and we'll get Fergus to answer that. Abraham, or shall I just ask?
Sorry, just bring it up, sorry.
So the questions are going to come up on the screen, Fergus. I'll point them out. The first one then is the Construction Playbook focuses on outcomes, but that does not align with the public sector annual budget round. What are the plans for engaging with Treasury on this point? Well,
firstly, in normal times, we don't have annual budget rounds. We have multi-year, typically 4-year spending review periods. This year is an anomalous one. because of the impact of COVID-19. So we were supposed to have a spending review undertaken in 2020 that would have set a 4-year budget for the period up until 2024. The Chancellor decided to cancel that because of the uncertainties flowing from the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and the public finances. But there will be a spending review exercise undertaken this year. So the rollover budget that we've seen in financial year 2021 to 22 is hopefully going to be a normal looking forwards. And our expectation is certainly that we are going to be reverting to the previous process that we've had since the days of Gordon Brown of multi-year spending review settlements, which should mean we have a lot more clarity about what funding is available for infrastructure and construction programmes. Although I would know that even with the annual settlement, some major projects and some key budgets like road and rail did get multi-year spending settlements in Spending Review 2020 anyway.
Okay, thank you, Fergus. Just a reminder, folks, if you do have any further supplementary questions, to post them in Slido. At the moment, I'm looking at Slido and there are no questions, so I take that there's no comments to date. So, Abraham, may I have the next question, please? So can you explain why it's referred to as playbook? To many, I think that's meant to be, not may, I think to many, this undermines the groundbreaking initiative it represents.
Yeah, I think it comes down to this being a matter of taste. The reason it's called the Construction Playbook is quite simply because we published a document a couple of years ago called the Outsourcing Playbook, which is in many ways the blueprint for this type of approach to having strategic relationships with a particular sector of the economy. Quite why the term playbook was chosen, I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay, we'll move on then. Abraham, what technology will government use to administer and manage the data available in supply chain mapping capabilities for use by the centre?
I don't think at this stage is a plan to use a specific technology. In terms of actually looking at supply chain management, well, there are a number of different techniques and tools that can be used for this. Different organisations within government adopt different approaches. They select the ones that they think are most relevant to them. I don't think the playbook or any of the other policies that we're looking to develop that are linked to it, such as some of those around the reforms of public procurement, will go as far as mandating particular technologies or approaches. But what I think they will do, as with the rest of the playbook, is increasingly effectively mandate that this is a type of activity that government departments and their arm's length bodies undertake as a matter of course, so that they do have a much better and richer set of data about their own supply chain and the market that they're trying to source products, supplies, services from in future.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll have the next question, if I may, please, Abraham. So, does the playbook cover digital transformation elements such as BIM, as these are crucial to achieve UK's carbon target? And would this be part of item 3? So a couple of questions in one there.
I think it is part of chapter 2 or section 2 of the playbook in the digitise, harmonise and standardise section. But the answer to the question is yes, it does. The playbook makes it very clear that the BIM mandate still applies and that the standard that's now required in order to meet the BIM mandate is the BIM framework, which is based on ISO 19650. And that is going to be the standard that we are going to be expecting our suppliers to have the capability to perform to.
Okay, thank you very much. And is the, just go back one, Abraham, if you would, is the carbon target heavily referenced?
The need to decarbonise and for procurers to seek through the assets that they are procuring to reduce carbon emissions, improve energy and heat efficiency, etc., is very much a theme of the playbook. But I think it's going to be even more of a theme of some of the documents that will be defining what it is we want to purchase, such as some of the work that's being done on public procurement now, which is likely to lead to a national procurement policy statement to be published at some point in the first half of this year.
Okay, thank you. I'll go on to the next question, Abraham, if I may. Now, this is a really interesting one because it deals with some social issues. So does the playbook look at gender equality and also pay gap in the construction sector?
I mean, the playbook does note the need to promote diversity and equality. Because of the nature of the document that it is, there isn't a specific section on this. However, again, I mean, I think some of the suite of documentation that's going to be put in place around this as a result of Project Speed is going to explicitly address this and look at widening opportunities and equality, and that these are going to be factors that we take into account when determining the social value of a procurement. But this is also a strand of work within the Construction Leadership Council. So in terms of the skills and workforce development theme of the Construction Leadership Council's work, one of the objectives that we have set on that is that the construction industry needs to become more diverse. It needs to become more attractive to women, people from ethnic minority backgrounds, and people from other more disadvantaged backgrounds. And the industry has got to do more to attract these people in so that they can fulfill a whole range of different roles within the industry. And it needs to ensure that they have career paths, they're fairly remunerated for the work that they do, and that they should be seen as an important part of the construction workforce going forward. So yes, I mean, this is not absolutely central to the playbook, but it is certainly central to a lot of the wider work that we're doing on construction.
Okay, thank you. I suspect that question has arisen because of our experience of the way construction operates, in that it normally changes if either the client says it's a good idea or it's legislated. I would think that's probably the thinking behind this. That's me being cynical. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. And this is very topical to those of us within Constructing Excellence. Obviously, we're delighted with the playbook, but what do you think is the biggest challenge for the implementation of this playbook?
In all honesty, I think it is going to be changing the ingrained culture amongst procurers, amongst consultants, amongst clients, and within the industry, which is very used to working in particular ways and is very focused on cost, risk management, and operational issues. Because really what the Construction Playbook is asking people to do is to take a step back from that, envisage a different, more collaborative approach, more collaborative ways of working, better communication, and being a lot more open and transparent about the way in which the industry operates, but also really the way in which public sector clients operate as well. And what this ultimately requires is an enormous investment of time and effort on both sides to build trust. And you're going to do that by a combination of investing in capability, whether it's in terms of people, training people, or new processes and systems. But actually, an awful lot of the investment is going to have to be made in trusting people to have a different kind of relationship with firms in the supply chain, with their clients, where they talk about issues in a much more open and frank way. And I think it is going to take time for people on both sides to feel comfortable having those conversations, and for those to become, in effect, business as usual. And the fact that we have to do this against the context of the worst economic circumstances that we've probably had since the Great Depression, the end of the Second World War, and certainly going back decades, definitely worse than we faced in the aftermath of the financial crisis, adds an extra dimension to that challenge.
And I think, Fergus, that's music to our ears, those of us that are involved with Constructing Excellence. Obviously, this has been our agenda since the Latham and Egan reports of the mid-90s. So, Fergus, you might like to think that with CE's network of regions and clubs, that maybe we have a part to play in the communication and dissemination of the construction playbook, much as we're doing currently with the value toolkit. We're rolling that out with the Construction Innovation Hub. So you might like to take that back to base and maybe think about whether there's a place for CE to help you roll it out.
Definitely. I mean, there is a place within this process for almost everybody, whether it's firms, whether it's representative organisations, whether it's professional or other networks. What we would really like to do is use these as a way of raising awareness about the construction playbook and what it's trying to achieve. And then as we move into the implementation period, raising awareness about what tools, training, or other mechanisms or packages of support are available for firms that do want to invest in this capability. We're also interested in these networks as mechanisms or vehicles for sharing best practice between firms and highlighting case studies of success, but also learning the lessons from failure so that we can avoid repeating it. Because this is a very good industry, well, an industry that has a very highly developed capability to learn how to do the same thing on multiple occasions, for good or ill.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, but I think the message I'd leave you, Fergus, is that we'd like to be part of the solution. And what might help you is a couple of pieces of work that we're working on at the moment within CE in my regions. One is to update the construction clients best practice guide, which was first brought about in 2006 in readiness for the Olympics. It was updated in 2014, but a lot of water's gone under the bridge. So that's going to be launched in a couple of weeks. So I'll make sure I share that with you, Fergus, because that's all about client best practice. And then another piece of work which we're working on is a diploma in smart collaboration. And that's come about because at one of these webinars a couple of months ago, we asked clients why they thought the roadmap to recovery may not be reached and why the construction sector may not actually be able to carry it out. And the one obstacle they said was that the industry knows the word collaboration, but not how to do it. They don't know the behaviors and culture needed, and that they talk about it in meetings like this and then go back to base and do what they've always done. So we've had a diploma in smart collaboration on the shelf for about 10 years. We've taken it off the shelf, dusted it off. We're updating it, and that's going to be launched in April. So again, I'll make sure I share that with you, Fergus.
Great.
Might be some mutual benefit there.
Yeah, an excellent
right, let's go to the next question, Abraham, please. The largest single barrier is price evaluation that focuses on CapEx. A low price getting 100% of price score will always distort things. Comment.
Well, I mean, in theory, we shouldn't for years have been running tenders where price accounts for 100% of the assessment. It should have always been a smaller part of it than that. What we are trying to do through the playbook is really drive home the message that's been in the Green Book, which is the government Bible when it comes to public procurement, about the need to focus on best value. Now, we've said this for 25 years, but we haven't really achieved it. But we are trying to use the playbook to make sure that when organisations are developing projects and programs, they pay more attention to best value and whole life performance of the asset than they do to initial capital expenditure. So hopefully that will mean that projects are being scored against a broader range of indicators, and other aspects of proposals that are put forward by industry will be taken full account of. But second, the other thing that we are trying to do to prevent the deliberate lowballing of bids is to place much more of an emphasis on the importance of organisations undertaking should-cost modelling in advance of launching procurement exercises. Now, this is certainly something that's going to take time to embed, and it's always going to be difficult where you're looking at certain kinds of asset which are more unique by their nature. So, for example, roads and things like that, no two are exactly alike in the way that schools can essentially be 98% the same. So it's probably going to work slightly better in some areas than others, at least initially. But the intention is that we will apply this to all major procurements as a means of trying to ensure that unfairly low-priced bids cannot get through the assessment process, and those firms or consortia that are putting them forward are challenged at a very early stage to justify those costs. Because we do not want to continue with the practice of firms effectively competing on price, and the only way that they can make a profit is by screwing firms in their supply chain. What we are keener on is moving away from that and saying, actually, we would like to see contractors, bidders, submit realistic prices and a fair margin of profit, and that should be one of the key elements of their bid. And they shouldn't be looking to make money by turning the screw on their supply chain. They should be looking to embed fair payment practices and a fair profit for everybody involved in the delivery of the project through the supply chain.
This is part of the culture change, isn't it, that we all seek?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is at the heart of it. I think purely personal opinion, and I'm sure colleagues in government would disagree with this, but I honestly think that possibly the single most important indicator and lever in terms of starting the process of cultural change that we can use this year is to send some clear signals that we are using should-cost modelling and we are throwing out deliberately underpriced bids from procurement processes. I think there is nothing that we could do that would be more effective than that in getting this message across over the course of the next 12 months.
You're right, Fergus, and leadership's going to play a big role, but I also think there's a responsibility on the supply chain to start saying no if they're asked to engage in procurement which goes against this playbook. I think that would have a hell of an effect. Whether that will happen, I don't know, but I'm going to move on to the next question. So the playbook still includes MEAT, M-E-A-T. I wonder if procurers will rely on this as a means to stick to lowest capex wins approach. That's pretty much a follow-on from the one before, isn't it?
Yeah.
I looked up MEAT because I didn't know what it meant, and I've got all sorts of descriptions on Google, which I won't share with you because some of them aren't really repeatable. But hopefully you know what that means, Fergus.
It means most economically advantageous tender. Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. That didn't come up on Google at all.
Yeah, it's. I actually think it's a term that it's not widely employed. It's certainly one that's been around for a few years, but it's not always that widely employed. But in theory, this can be interpreted as meaning best value, because economically advantageous is not necessarily the same as lowest cost. And I think part of the problem has been in the past that people have projected the meaning of lowest cost onto this, rather than actually taking the time and trouble to work out what economically advantageous should mean. But in terms of answering the question, I think everything that I said before applies.
Yeah.
We are looking to move away from a lowest capex based approach to one that focuses on delivering best value over the life cycle of the asset.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just tell you what came up top on Google. It was the MEAT Chunk Enterprises Adventure Team. So there we are. Let's have the next question, shall we? Is there a recognition from government that a presumption in favour of MMC will initially increase capital costs for construction projects?
Yes, I think there is. We've got sufficient experience of using MMC to deliver various government programmes, and particularly in the area of schools, but increasingly we're seeing it in the areas of transport, defence, and obviously house building, where this has been supported in one way or another by Homes England. that we are actually building up a better picture and a much better understanding of the differences between procuring MMC solutions and traditional construction as a service. And we do understand that when you use MMC, the pattern of expenditure is different. And I think that's something that's understood and is increasingly going to be built into our own internal financial planning.
Okay, thank you. Apparently, I've shown my ignorance by not knowing what MEAT means. People are telling me in the chat box. So thank you for that, folks. Let's. By the way, just on the MMC front, I hosted one of these webinars earlier in the week, and there was an architect on who said that their involvement in MMC in terms of design had gone up 2,000% in the last few years. So I think that's probably an indication of where the industry is moving, which is great news. Let's move on to the next question, if we may, please. What does the alignment between the value toolkit and the scorecard look like?
I wasn't quite sure what scorecard was being referred to, but the aim of the approach that we're trying to embed through the playbook, focusing best value, is to drive much wider use of the value toolkit that we've developed. Although if organisations want to use other toolkits that have been developed by other organisations or other value-based approaches, plenty of those. They exist in the private sector, they exist in the public sector, they exist in the professional institutions as well, and we wouldn't stop them from doing that. But one of the reasons that we have emphasised the use of the value toolkit is that we think that this is one of the most comprehensive approaches, and it actually builds on an awful lot of work that's been done previously on this issue in both the public and private sectors. So it originally started as a Construction Leadership Council initiative involving Institution of Civil Engineers, RICS, and a number of public and private sector bodies that are active in the procurement or delivery of construction work. And we have come up with something that we think is a really useful toolkit, and it's something that public procurers can, and private sector procurers as well, can use to identify what it is they actually want a particular project or program to deliver. And it enables them to have informed conversations internally and then with potential suppliers about what the trade-offs are between cost, social value investments like skills, and say the longer-term environmental performance of an asset. And we think it's going to be a really effective means, if it's used well, of defining what is ultimately a really nebulous concept, which is best value, and which is a subjective concept. It can mean different things in the context of different developments or projects, and that that flexibility is essential. What we are really trying to do, though, is enable people to, in the context of their project, define what best value is, what it looks like, and then when they've got that definition, it enables them to translate that into the kind of things that can be used in procurement exercises as specific criteria against which potential bidders can be assessed. So and the aim is to fill a gap that's previously existed between the aspiration and the policy and the practicalities of procurement and delivery. And that's what we hope the toolkit will achieve, and that's why we've been referring to it in the playbook.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please, Abraham. So is it the intention that this flows down to local authorities, procurement and delivery?
Well, the playbook won't be mandatory for local authorities in the way that it is for central government departments and their arm's length bodies, but we have worked with the Local Government Association and a number of large local authority contracting authorities in the development of the playbook, and we are hoping that it will be adopted by a number of these. Certainly, we've had discussions with quite a few local authorities, and there is a lot of interest in them adopting this approach wholly or in part. So yes, I would certainly expect to see it percolating into local authority procurement exercises over the course of the next couple of years.
Thank you. Next question, please, Abraham. I should explain, ladies and gents, these questions we've taken from last time. There were over 80 that we were asked. We've tried to condense them and bring them together. And we're going through the most popular questions because you were voting for them on Slido. We have had some additional comments and questions, Fergus, which I'll try and get to once we've gone through this initial list.
Sure.
Portfolios and longer term contracting. Will there be mechanisms in place to ensure opportunities for smaller regional main contractors to bid for work? And there were quite a lot of questions on this, Fergus, last time. So obviously, you know, more SMEs, regional contractors and so on.
Yeah, one of the themes of procurement policy going forward is going to be to try and open up a wider swathe of government contracts to SMEs and also to firms that operate regionally as opposed to nationally. So the playbook includes a number of references to this, but in terms of actually having a good understanding of the policy, I would point people to the recent green paper that was published on procurement policy and possible reforms, and also to some of the documents that are going to come out over the course of the next few months, which I think are going to set out very clearly that we should be building on what we've been doing over the past few years, which has been trying to create greater opportunities for SMEs to deliver goods and services directly to government, by driving contracting authorities to, when they're designing procurement exercises, frameworks, and any other opportunities for firms to bid to supply goods or services, they actually think which ones are suitable for SMEs or medium-sized companies, and they are careful not to exclude them by, for example, grouping things together in big lots. So what I'm hoping is that we will have a more varied and sophisticated approach to tender exercises that we've seen in the past, and these will offer opportunities to SMEs. And I would see the future frameworks perhaps building on the approach that the Cabinet Office adopted when they developed a whole suite of frameworks for use in procurement of construction works, where they actually segmented these on the basis of project value, with the intention of having a number of frameworks that would essentially only be attractive to SMEs. And also, if you look at the way in which the Department for Education has worked, they have frameworks that operate geographically as well. And again, I mean, these are intended to enable medium-sized regional contractors to bid to deliver schools across the UK. So I would hope that the answer to the question is yes, and I would hope that in a few years' time, what we're going to see is that more projects are being delivered for government by exactly this kind of firm.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll have the next question, please. Great to hear that this will apply to all government departments. Will this include MOD as their procurement practice?
It does include MOD. It does include MOD, but defence and security procurement has derogations from various international agreements, the World Trade Organization's government procurement agreement, the EU procurement regulations in the past, reflecting the fact that some of these procurements are security sensitive. What I think you will see is that when MOD is procuring normal construction services, of which they procure a lot, so military accommodation, civil engineering works around bases and things like that, those kind of procurement exercises absolutely will follow the approach set out in the Construction Playbook. When it comes to building nuclear weapons storage facilities, you will appreciate that security requirements do probably mean that there will be a more limited number of contractors allowed to bid for that. But yes, certainly for your average MOD procurement, the playbook will apply to it.
Okay, thank you, Fergus. Similar question, really, the next one. What application does the playbook have to Highways England, statutory highway?
Highways England have to adopt the playbook. They are an arm's length body of the Department for Transport. Statutory highway authorities are in general local authorities, so they do not. It would be optional for them as to whether or not they adopted it.
Okay, thank you. And the next one then, please. What tools will government use to monitor productivity and measure through benchmarking across projects and programmes of work?
Okay, this is part of phase 2 of work on the playbook and the implementation of it. We have not taken a final decision on this yet. It's something that's being worked on and actively debated within government. We are looking at a number of different productivity metrics. I suspect that in the short term, we will probably be focusing on labour productivity as a metric. So possibly GVA per worker per hour, or total project cost divided by labour hours, mainly because this is the most readily available productivity metric that we have, that is often used by firms on sites already, and that client organisations within government are familiar with. I think over time, we're likely to broaden the focus away from simple labour productivity, and I think this is going to be essential as we start using MMC to deliver a wider range of projects, simply because the labour productivity metrics don't capture things that we are also interested in. For example, efficiency of resource utilisation, waste minimisation, and where we're going to need a measure that's closer to total factor productivity that you would see applied in other sectors. So I suspect that this is going to be something that is going to change over the next few years. And we might start with something that's a relatively simple framework of indicators, but I think that over time this could get more sophisticated, and we'll try and capture a wider spectrum of measures or activities that in total enable us to assess the productivity of firms and the way in which projects are being delivered.
Thank you, Fergus. We've got one more question that we've sort of brought back from a fortnight ago. How can the playbook be applied and possibly mandated or advised for the net zero investment space for a mixture of private and public investment?
It's a really interesting question, because there are a number of areas, housing being an obvious one, where we don't directly procure, but government is a funder and has an interest in sustainability and carbon emissions of what's produced as a result of the project that our funding contributes to. Similarly, some of you will have seen that the National Infrastructure Strategy published last year announced that we're going to be creating a new National Infrastructure Bank, which is also going to be a public-private sector collaboration, central government, local government, mayoral authorities, and the private sector. So this is an area that we are going to need to look at. My view is that there is a strong case, and I think that's to be shared by other people in government, for trying to drive the approach that's set out in the playbook into the way in which organisations that are delivering projects that use some public funding are delivered. I would hope that private sector investors would see some advantages in that, because I don't think that you can quarrel with a lot of elements of the construction playbook in terms of effective market sounding, careful thought being given to the design of the procurement, the aim to deliver best value over long periods of time, and also the concept of trying to deliver wider social value through these investments. So whilst I suspect this might be a mixed picture in terms of the extent to which the provisions of the playbook are adopted, and it may well come down to a simple question of exactly how much funding individual stakeholders are putting into a particular project. I would hope that in any construction project, which is public-private sector, but where there is a significant element of public sector investment, we see some of the key elements of the playbook being embedded in the way in which that project is procured and delivered.
Thank you, Fergus. We've not got long left. We've got less than 10 minutes. But what I'm going to do, Fergus, if I may, we have had a number of questions crop up on Slido.
Yeah.
So I'm going to whip through some of those, if I may.
Go on.
In the meantime, very timely, Abraham, could you go to Slido, folks? And would you? There is now a survey on there which we'd like you to fill in, which is very helpful from us in terms of planning future events. It's also helpful for us to feed back to Fergus on what you thought. So can we scroll to the top, Abraham? You're down at the bottom at the moment. Can we scroll to the top? Are you able to do that? Or some of these have been covered in some respects, but I think there's some more above that, or there's some more that I can find. Let me ask the questions. The first question I've got is: will there be any sort of formal mechanism for challenging procurement exercises which aren't following the guidelines?
Yes, absolutely. Firstly, raise them with the contracting authority that should be working in a way that's consistent with the provisions of the playbook. If not, the Cabinet Office within government, the Crown Commercial Services, part of that, is responsible for the overall implementation of the playbook, and they are going to be carefully monitoring what departments and agencies do. And if contractors don't think the guidelines have been followed and they've raised this with the contracting authority and nothing has changed, then by all means report them to the Cabinet Office.
Thank you. The list of signatories, contributors appears to be less than 20% female. Should a strategy for improving diversity not have been included as a key priority? Well, we did pick this up, didn't we, in one of the questions? Not quite as pointed as this, but I don't know whether there's anything else you want to add, Fergus.
Well, the strategy, there is a strategy for improving diversity, it's just not part of the playbook, but I entirely agree with the point. Unfortunately, this is an industry that's 86% male, and the signatories to the playbook reflect that. It's something that needs to change over time.
Thank you. Why are you going down the route of not mandating? It hasn't worked before, so why should it now?
We are mandating it. It's mandatory for government departments and their arm's length bodies, just not for the wider public sector.
Thank you. Will the playbook address the huge waste of time tendering? In two recent cases, circa 20 organisations invited to tender using well-known frameworks. Yes,
we are looking at ways and means of trying to reduce the time and admin burden of responding to tender exercises, whether this is through government departments and other bodies in the public sector, using the Common Assessment Standard for pre-qualification, or simply through reducing the number of frameworks and approaches that we have, or the organisations within government use, or looking at ways in which we can streamline and improve our processes, because we recognise that we can't say to small and medium-sized firms, we want you to bid to us directly to undertake works, and then expect them to provide us with 400 or 500 page responses to requests for tenders. So yes, this is something that we're looking at reforming now.
Okay, well, the next question is really a statement. Great to see trust coming up during the Q&A, and certainly I'm sure we'd all echo that. So let's go to Paul Greenwood's question. He says, thank you, most informative. Are you available to talk to other Constructing Excellent clubs? If so, how can we contact you?
Yeah, but very happy to, and Andrew's got all my details.
Okay, yeah, I would say be careful how you answer that because you might be inundated. We've got about 40 clubs up and down the UK, and I suspect, as I mentioned earlier, they'd all be keen to disseminate this. But okay, so you're happy for me to contact you via me?
Yep, that's fine, yes.
Okay. Vaughan Bernard, good friend of CE, are you going to track projects procured under Playbook rules and monitor performance on common standards?
Yes, we are. It's the intention of Cabinet Office to do that. They are going to be requiring contracting authorities to report against a number of quantitative metrics, but there are also going to be qualitative assessments of their performance and the way in which different procurement exercises have been undertaken.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to whip through these questions very quickly. Maybe we have to answer some of them offline. We'll try 2 or 3 more. In the honest conversations on costs, will there be an acceptance that tier 1 contractors need larger margins if opportunity behaviour is to be eliminated?
Yes, margins of 1 to 2% are simply not sustainable, and they just overall contribute to a industry that is,
It's part of that culture. It's part of the culture change, isn't it, Fergus, really, that we're all looking for. So really excited about what the playbook is looking to achieve. Key will be defining outcomes clearly. Is there a date for the launch of the project scorecard?
Not yet, but I hope it'll be first half of the year.
Okay. The next one is really a comment. So bids are normally price quality. However, qualitative submissions are all very similar, hence it still drives down to price. So that's a comment, really. Huge misunderstanding of MMC. Modular buildings with lack flexibility are being missold as MMC and widely deployed, like Elliott Huts. That's a comment. What form of training and learning are you looking to instigate to prepare clients for this more open, trusting, collaborative approach?
We're actually looking at that, and it's a topic that's being explored between the CLC and government at the moment.
You might like to look at my diploma then in collaborative working.
We take the diploma in collaborative working, but no, we're looking at what sort of training we think we need and what the right balance is between what I might call the functional training, which explains how to do things, mechanisms and technologies, and perhaps sort of more behaviourally orientated training, which is about encouraging a more collaborative approach, improved communication skills and things. But we might end up developing a shared training approach across the public and private sectors, which we think could be quite useful.
Fergus, we are at 3 o'clock. Are you happy to just tip over a couple of minutes?
Yeah, that's fine. We can carry on for a few more minutes.
Okay, so how does the playbook relate to the national TOMS Wales? There's another term I'm not familiar with.
I'm not sure about this one.
I wear on holiday, but anyway.
No, I'm not sure about that one either. But it's the playbook doesn't apply to the devolved assemblies, although we've sent them a copy and said, if you're interested and you want to consider applying this, we'd be very happy to work with you.
Okay, thank you. Why is the playbook only applicable to central government, not the wider government?
Essentially, because if it was to be applicable to wider government, we'd have to legislate for it, and that's a lot more time consuming and difficult, whereas we can just mandate its implementation across central government and arm's length bodies.
Okay, do you think it's possible to procure socially productive places?
I think if you get the output specification right, and you think through very carefully about how you're going to use a project to deliver best value, yes, you can. But it involves an enormous amount of investment in the project design and inception phases to get that right.
Okay, the COVID crisis has emphasised the importance of peer-reviewed evidence. To what extent has the playbook been subject to independent peer review?
Well, I mean, it was developed by an incredibly large number of people, probably around 200 involved in its development to one extent or another. And the intention is that future iterations of the playbook, of which there will be one a year, will be developed involving a similar collaborative process, but also based on feedbacks and comments that come into the Cabinet Office over the course of the year based on the experience of implementing it. So I wouldn't say this is going to be quite the same as a full academic peer review, but there is certainly going to be, if you like, rigorous informal peer review of the playbook.
Okay, thank you. Highest score is awarded to lowest price, not closest to average tender, which drives contractors' price down. I think that's a comment rather than a question. Helen's noting there needs to be fewer frameworks and shorter lists or a selection stage to reduce numbers. Training for consultants equally important. Another comment for you to take back. And Helen saying, note to make real traction, it has to be mandated wider public sector. Again, a comment rather than a question. And we've also got an understanding of TOMS, a national social value model used by those who measure and monitor the delivery of social value. So thank you for that explanation. And Helen, again, as a comment, is saying there's now a new white paper out for housing with 7 cost models. So I think, Fergus, we've got to the end of the questions. So few. Thank you so much. I don't think we've ever had as many questions as we have for your presentation. So on behalf of us all, can I thank you for coming back and answering those questions so openly and honestly. I'm sure the feedback will be equally positive to what we've seen on screen. So folks, if you are still watching in, please make sure before you disappear, you fill in the survey. Next week, we have Stuart Dalgano from AIM-CH, who's going to be talking about an Innovate UK project around MMC and housing, making it more productive, more efficient, etc. So he actually attracted our biggest audience 12 months ago when he gave us an update first at the beginning of last year. So we're inviting him back because a lot has happened in the 8 or so months since he was there. So I'm going to thank the folks at Leaders Meets for hosting us today. I'm going to thank you, Fergus, once again for your time and
thank you.
Knowledge, much appreciated. And I'm going to thank everybody for tuning in. I hope you found it useful. I certainly did. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. For now, have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.